Liam Brooks was just an IT guy, a single dad rushing between work and his 8-year-old daughter. Ava Carter was the billionaire CEO no one in the building dared look in the eye. A routine computer crash accidentally revealed a private photo and triggered a question no one expected from the most powerful woman in the tower. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" Could one honest moment be enough to shake the walls she'd spent years building around herself? The elevator to the 40th floor moved too fast. Liam Brooks gripped his toolkit tighter and watched the numbers climb. 36, 37, 38. He'd worked at Carter Global for 3 years and had never been this high in the building. His usual territory was the 3rd floor, where the regular employees sat in their cubicles and nobody noticed when he crawled under desks to fix their connection issues. The 40th floor was different. Executive territory. The kind of place where assistants wore suits that cost more than his monthly rent, and every conversation happened behind closed doors. Liam had heard stories about the top floor. Everyone had. It was where Ava Carter's office occupied the entire northern wing, where floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city like she owned every building in sight, which, to be fair, she probably did own a decent percentage of them. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in an art museum. Marble floors, abstract paintings that Liam couldn't begin to understand. A reception desk made of dark wood that gleamed under recessed lighting. A woman in her 50s looked up from behind the desk. Her expression was pleasant but efficient, the kind of smile that had been practiced 10,000 times. "Liam Brooks." "It department," he said, holding up his badge even though she'd clearly been expecting him. "Miss Carter is waiting. 3rd door on the left." The receptionist gestured down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. "She has meetings starting in 45 minutes, so she'll need the system running before then." Liam nodded and started walking. His shoes made soft sounds against the marble. Through the windows on his right, he could see the entire city spread out below. It was 10 in the morning, and the sunlight made everything look clean and sharp. From up here, the traffic and the noise and the chaos all disappeared into something almost peaceful. He found the 3rd door. It was already open. Ava Carter stood behind her desk with her back to him, phone pressed to her ear. She was tall. Taller than he'd expected from the few times he'd seen her in company-wide emails or walking through the lobby with an entourage of executives trailing behind her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless but probably required a professional. She wore a charcoal suit that looked like it had been made specifically for her, which it probably had. "I don't care what the projections say," she was saying into the phone. Her voice was controlled, but Liam could hear the edge underneath. "If the Tokyo office can't deliver the numbers they promised, we restructure. I'm not interested in excuses." Liam stood in the doorway, unsure whether to announce himself or wait. He settled for waiting. Ava finished her call and turned around. For a second, her eyes swept over him with the kind of assessment that made him feel like a balance sheet being reviewed. Then something in her expression shifted slightly, became fractionally less sharp. "You're from IT," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Liam Brooks. I got the call about a system malfunction. It froze during a video conference 20 minutes ago. Won't restart properly." She gestured toward the massive desk where 3 monitors sat dark and lifeless. "I have presentations to review before the investor meetings this afternoon. I'll take a look," Liam said, moving toward the desk. He set his toolkit down carefully on the corner, trying not to disturb the neat stacks of documents arranged across the surface. Ava stepped back, giving him space but not leaving. She stood near the windows, arms crossed, watching him work. Liam tried to ignore the feeling of being observed. He was used to working while people hovered nearby, asking how much longer it would take or explaining again what had gone wrong as if he hadn't understood the first time. But Ava didn't say anything. She just watched with the same focused intensity she'd probably used in 1,000 boardrooms. Liam powered down the system completely, checked the connections, then initiated a hard restart. The monitors flickered to life one by one. He watched the startup sequence, waiting for any error messages or warning signs. The main screen loaded her desktop. Clean, organized, folders labeled with project names and dates. Nothing personal, except the background image started to load. Liam's hand froze over the keyboard. It wasn't supposed to be visible. Normally, the system would have loaded straight to her login screen. But something in the crash had disrupted the sequence, and now the background image filled the entire center monitor in full resolution. It was a photograph of Ava by a lake. She wore jeans and a simple white shirt, standing on a wooden dock with water stretching out behind her. No makeup that he could see. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She was smiling, not the controlled expression she wore in company photos, but something genuine and unguarded. The sunlight caught her face in a way that made her look younger, softer, more human. Liam reached for the keyboard to close it, to get to the login screen as quickly as possible and pretend he hadn't seen anything. Stop. Ava's voice cut through the quiet office. Liam's hand stopped halfway to the keyboard. He looked up and found her standing much closer than before. Close enough that he could see the exact moment her expression changed from neutral observation to something harder to read. She was staring at the screen, at her own image reflected there. "You saw it," she said. Not a question, an acknowledgement. Liam wanted to lie. Every instinct told him to lie, to protect himself, to maintain the professional distance that existed between a billionaire CEO and an IT technician who fixed computers. But something in her tone, something in the way she was looking at the photograph like she'd forgotten it existed, made him tell the truth. "Yes," he said. "I'm sorry. The system loaded incorrectly. I wasn't trying to." "I know you weren't trying." Ava moved closer to the desk, her eyes still fixed on the image. "That was taken 3 years ago. I forgot I'd set it as the background." Liam didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Ava looked at him directly then, and he saw something in her expression that he hadn't expected. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something closer to curiosity, mixed with something else he couldn't quite identify. "What did you think?" she asked. "I'm sorry?" "Of the photograph. What did you think when you saw it?" Liam felt like he'd stepped into a conversation that was happening in a different language. This wasn't how interactions with executives went. They didn't ask IT technicians for their opinions on personal photographs. They barely acknowledged IT technicians existed unless something was broken. "I don't think my opinion matters, Miss Carter," he said carefully. "But you have one." She tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same intensity she'd used when he first walked in. "Everyone has opinions. They just don't usually say them out loud." Liam looked at the photograph again. At the version of Ava Carter who smiled like she meant it, who stood by a lake in casual clothes without an entourage or an audience. "It's a good photograph," he said finally. "You look happy in it." "Happy?" Ava repeated the word like she was testing its weight. "Is that all?" There was something in her tone that felt like a challenge, or maybe a test. Liam had the distinct feeling that his next words mattered more than they should, though he couldn't understand why. He could play it safe. Give her the answer she probably heard from everyone else. Tell her she looked professional, put together, successful. Or he could tell her the truth. "You look real," Liam said. "Like a person, not a position." The silence that followed felt enormous. Liam immediately regretted his honesty. He'd crossed a line, said something too personal, revealed too much of what he actually thought. He waited for her to tell him to leave, to send a complaint to his supervisor, to remind him that he was there to fix computers and nothing else. Instead, Ava turned away from the screen and looked at him with an expression he couldn't read at all. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" The question landed like a physical object dropped into the room. Liam stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a simple question." Ava's voice was calm, clinical almost, like she was asking about quarterly projections. "In that photograph, do you think I'm beautiful?" Liam's mind raced through possible responses. This had to be some kind of test, or a trap. Executives didn't ask employees questions like this. It violated every unwritten rule about professional boundaries and power dynamics, but she was waiting for an answer. And something in her eyes told him she would know if he lied. "Yes," he said quietly. "You're beautiful in that photograph, but not because of anything to do with how you look. Ava's eyebrows lifted slightly. Explain that. You look peaceful, Liam said, the words coming easier now that he'd committed to honesty. Like you're somewhere you actually want to be. Doing something you chose to do. That's what makes it a good photograph. Not your face or your clothes or anything else. Just that you look like yourself. The silence stretched out again. Ava stood very still, her expression unreadable. Liam couldn't tell if he'd said exactly the right thing or exactly the wrong thing. Then something shifted in her face. The controlled mask she'd worn since he walked in cracked just slightly, revealing something underneath that looked almost like relief. No one has said that to me in a very long time, she said softly. That I look like myself. Liam didn't know how to respond to that, so he waited. Ava walked back to the windows, putting distance between them. When she spoke again, her voice had returned to its usual controlled tone, but something in it sounded different, less certain. Finish the login sequence. I need to access those files before the meetings. Yes, ma'am. Liam turned back to the computer, his hands moving through the familiar motions of pulling up the login screen. The photograph disappeared, replaced by the standard company login interface. He typed in the administrative override, reset her session, and waited for the system to fully load. When her desktop appeared, clean and organized and completely professional, he stepped back. Everything's running normally now. If you have any other issues, just call the help desk and they'll send someone up. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Liam gathered his toolkit and headed for the door. He was almost in the hallway when her voice stopped him. Liam, he turned back. She was still standing by the windows, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the glass. Thank you for being honest with me, she said. Most people aren't. Liam nodded, unsure what to say to that. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. The elevator ride back down to the third floor felt different than the ride up. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, though he couldn't identify exactly what. He kept replaying the conversation in his mind, analyzing every word, trying to understand what had actually happened in that office. By the time he got back to his desk, his phone was already buzzing with 3 new help tickets. Someone's printer was jammed. Someone else couldn't access their email. Normal problems. Regular work. But Liam couldn't stop thinking about the photograph by the lake, or the question Ava Carter had asked him, or the way she'd looked when he told her the truth. He spent the rest of the day moving between floors, fixing computers, resetting passwords, explaining for the 100th time that turning it off and on again actually did solve most problems. His daughter Emma texted him at 3 to remind him about parent-teacher conferences that evening. He replied with a thumbs up and a promise to pick her up on time. Normal day, normal life, normal problems. Except he couldn't forget the way Ava Carter had looked at her own photograph like she'd forgotten that version of herself existed. Liam picked Emma up from school at 3:30, like he did every day. She climbed into the passenger seat of his 10-year-old Honda with her backpack trailing behind her, already talking about the science project her class was starting next week. We get to pick partners, and Maya said she wants to work with me. So that's good because she's really smart and won't make me do all the work like Justin did last time. Liam pulled away from the curb, half listening to Emma's stream of consciousness recap of her day, while his mind kept drifting back to the 40th floor, to the photograph, to the question Ava Carter had asked him. Dad, are you listening? Yeah. Maya's your partner. That's great, sweetheart. Emma gave him the look she'd perfected over her 8 years of life, the one that said she knew when he was only pretending to pay attention. I said Maya might be moving to California. Her dad got a new job. Oh. Liam focused on the road, on the conversation, pushing thoughts of Ava Carter firmly aside. That's hard. I'm sorry. It's okay. She hasn't moved yet. And we can still video chat. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Emma wanted the cereal with the cartoon character on the box. Liam said no. Then yes, when she pointed out that it was actually cheaper than the healthy kind he usually bought. Small victories in the ongoing negotiation that was single parenthood. The parent-teacher conference went fine. Emma was doing well in all her subjects. maybe struggling a little with math, but nothing serious. Her teacher said she was creative, thoughtful, sometimes too quiet in group settings. Liam nodded and took notes and promised to work with her on multiplication tables. Normal evening, normal routine, normal life. Except when Emma fell asleep that night, Liam found himself staring at his laptop in the kitchen. Coffee going cold beside him, thinking about the gap between who people appeared to be and who they actually were. About how Ava Carter probably went home to some penthouse apartment every night, surrounded by luxury and success, and felt completely alone. He closed the laptop and went to bed. The next morning started the same as every other morning. Liam dropped Emma at school, drove to Carter Global, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and settled in at his desk with a list of help tickets already waiting. Printer jams. Password resets. Someone's computer was making a weird noise. At 9:45, his desk phone rang. IT department. This is Liam. Mr. Brooks. This is Rachel Henley from Executive Administration. Miss Carter would like to see you in her office at 10 o'clock. The words landed like cold water. Liam sat up straighter in his chair, his mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Is there a technical issue? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Miss Carter didn't specify. She just requested your presence at 10. The line went dead. Liam stared at his phone for a long moment. Around him, the 3rd floor continued its normal rhythm, keyboards clicking, quiet conversations, the hum of the air conditioning. He looked at the clock. 9:46. 14 minutes to figure out what he'd done wrong and how to fix it. He replayed yesterday's conversation in his mind for the 100th time. He'd been honest, maybe too honest, but she'd asked. She'd directly asked for his opinion, and he'd given it to her without any ulterior motive, without trying to flatter or manipulate or gain anything from it. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd crossed a line by speaking to her like she was a person instead of a position. Maybe his honesty had been interpreted as disrespect. By the time 10 o'clock arrived, Liam had convinced himself he was about to be fired. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer this time. He watched the numbers climb and tried to prepare himself for the conversation ahead. He'd worked at Carter Global for 3 years. It was a good job, stable, with benefits that covered Emma's health care. He couldn't afford to lose it. The receptionist recognized him this time and waved him through without checking his badge. Liam walked down the marble hallway, his reflection moving alongside him in the polished floor. Ava Carter's door was closed. He knocked twice. Come in. He opened the door and found her standing at the windows again, looking out over the city. She wore navy today, another perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than his car. Her hair was pulled back in the same effortless style. Close the door, she said without turning around. Liam closed it. The click of the latch sounded too loud in the quiet office. Sit down. There were 2 chairs facing her desk. Liam chose the one on the left and sat down, his hands resting on his knees. He waited. Ava turned from the window and walked to her desk, but she didn't sit. She stood behind her chair, hands resting on the back of it, looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Okay, Liam said, though his mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. Yesterday, when you saw that photograph and I asked for your opinion, why did you tell me the truth? Of all the questions he'd expected, that wasn't one of them. Liam took a moment to consider his answer. Because you asked, he said finally, and you seemed like you actually wanted to know. Most people, when asked a question by their CEO, tell her what they think she wants to hear. You didn't do that. No, ma'am. Why not? Liam met her gaze directly. Because you can probably tell when people are lying to you, and because I figured if you asked the question, you already knew the answer you were supposed to get. Maybe you wanted to hear something different. Something flickered in Ava's expression. She moved around the desk and sat down, the chair making a soft sound against the floor. Do you know why I started this company, Mr. Brooks? The question threw him. No, ma'am. Because I wanted to build something that mattered. Something real. She looked down at her hands, perfectly manicured, resting on the desk surface. I was 24. I had an idea and no money, and everyone told me it was impossible. So I made it possible. Liam didn't interrupt. He had the sense she was working toward something, and he needed to let her get there. 20 years later, I have everything I was supposed to want. Success, wealth, influence. I sit in rooms with people who control billions of dollars, and they listen when I talk. She looked up at him, and I can't remember the last time anyone spoke to me like I was a human being instead of a balance sheet. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't the controlled CEO from yesterday. This was something rawer, more vulnerable. Yesterday, you saw a photograph of me from 3 years ago. Do you know where it was taken? No, ma'am. A lake in Vermont. I rented a cabin for a week, completely alone. No phone calls, no meetings, no one needing me to make decisions or approve budgets or fix their problems. She looked toward the windows, though from where she sat, she couldn't see the view. It was the last time I felt like myself. Liam wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the right words, so he stayed quiet and let her continue. When you told me I looked real, like a person and not a position, I realized you'd identified exactly what I'd lost, and I couldn't stop thinking about it all day. Ava's gaze returned to him, sharp and focused. I kept replaying our conversation, analyzing it, trying to figure out if you had an angle, some ulterior motive for being honest with me. I don't, Liam said quietly. I fix computers. That's my angle. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, almost a smile. I know. I had my assistant pull your employment file. 3 years at Carter Global. Consistently good performance reviews. Single father, 1 daughter, 8 years old. You live in an apartment in Riverside, drive a Honda Accord, and have never asked for a promotion or a raise beyond the standard annual increase. The fact that she'd investigated him should have felt invasive, but somehow it didn't. It felt like confirmation that yesterday had affected her the same way it had affected him. You're invisible, Ava said, and there was no cruelty in it, just observation. You do your job well, but nobody notices you. You move through this building like you don't exist. That's accurate, Liam admitted. Why? Because I have a daughter who needs stability more than I need recognition. Because keeping my head down and doing good work means I keep my job, and Emma keeps her health care, and we keep our apartment. That's enough. Ava studied him for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a folder. She set it on the desk between them. I'm launching a new internal project. Very small team. Very confidential. It's focused on restructuring our approach to employee wellness and company culture. I need people on this team who will tell me the truth, not what they think I want to hear. Liam looked at the folder but didn't touch it. I'd like you to join the team, Ava said. The words didn't make sense at first. Liam replayed them in his mind, trying to understand what she was actually saying. I'm an IT technician, he said slowly. I don't know anything about employee wellness or company culture. No, but you know what it's like to be invisible in this building. You know what the regular employees experience every day because you're one of them. Ava leaned forward slightly. And you're honest. That's what I need more than expertise. Liam's mind was racing. This didn't make sense. CEOs didn't just randomly invite low-level employees onto special projects because of one honest conversation. Why me? He asked. There are hundreds of employees here. Thousands. Why would you pick someone you just met yesterday? Because yesterday you looked at me and saw a person, Ava said simply. Everyone else in this building sees a position, a title, a source of approval or fear or opportunity. But you saw someone who looked peaceful in a photograph by a lake. That's the perspective I need. Liam looked down at the folder again. He thought about Emma, about the stability of his current job, about the risk of stepping outside his invisible role. He also thought about Ava's question from yesterday. Do you think I'm beautiful? And the way she'd looked when he gave her an honest answer, like someone had finally told her something true. What would this involve? He asked. Meetings. Probably 2 or 3 times a week, mostly in the evenings. You'd keep your regular position, but this would be additional work. The team is small, Just 5 people, including yourself. Confidential. We're trying to identify systemic problems in how this company treats its employees and find real solutions, not band-aids. Would there be additional compensation? Yes. 15% increase to your base salary, plus a project completion bonus. 15%. That was significant. That was Emma's college fund actually becoming real instead of theoretical. But money wasn't the only consideration. Liam thought about what it would mean to step into visibility, to be associated with a project run directly by Ava Carter. It would change how people saw him, how they treated him. It would change everything. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Ava pushed the folder across the desk toward him. Take this. Read through the project overview. If you're interested, let me know by the end of the week. Liam picked up the folder. It was heavier than it looked. I'm not trying to pull you out of your comfortable, invisible position as some kind of social experiment, Ava said, her tone gentler than before. I'm asking because I think you have something valuable to offer, and because I need people around me who aren't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. Liam stood up, the folder tucked under his arm. He should say something professional, something appropriate. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll give it serious consideration. Instead, he said, you should go back to that lake sometime. The one in Vermont. Ava looked at him, surprised. You looked happy there, Liam continued. Like you said, like yourself. Maybe you need that more than another successful project. He left before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. The folder under his arm felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Liam's mind was spinning with possibilities and consequences, risks and opportunities. He'd expected to be fired. Instead, he'd been offered something he didn't know how to categorize. A chance, a complication, a risk. When he got back to his desk, he shoved the folder into his bag and tried to focus on the help tickets waiting for him. But his mind kept drifting to Ava's office, to the conversation they'd had, to the way she'd looked at him when he told her to go back to the lake. At 3:30, he picked Emma up from school. She talked about her day and he listened, really listened this time. When they got home, he made dinner while she did homework at the kitchen table. After she went to bed, he opened the folder. Inside was a detailed project overview. Timelines, goals, team structure. Everything professional and organized and exactly what he'd expected, except for a handwritten note on the first page. In neat script, thank you for seeing me. A. C. Liam read it 3 times. Then he closed the folder and sat in his kitchen, staring at nothing, wondering what he was going to tell her by the end of the week. Liam spent 3 days reading and rereading the project overview. He'd pull it out after Emma went to bed, spread the papers across the kitchen table, and try to imagine himself in those meetings, sitting in a room with executives and department heads, offering opinions about company culture like he had any authority to do so. The rational part of his brain kept listing reasons to decline. He wasn't qualified. He'd be out of his depth. The visibility would make him uncomfortable. What if he failed and lost not just the project, but his regular job too? But there was another voice, quieter but persistent, that kept replaying Ava's words. You saw a person. That's the perspective I need. On Thursday evening, Emma asked him why he kept staring at the papers on the table instead of watching the movie they'd put on. Liam told her it was just work stuff. She accepted that answer and went back to the movie, but he caught her glancing at him a few times with the same perceptive look she got when she knew he wasn't telling her everything. Friday morning, he made his decision. At 8:30, before he could change his mind, Liam called the number on Rachel Henley's business card that had been tucked into the folder. Executive Administration, Rachel speaking. Hi, this is Liam Brooks. I need to speak with Miss Carter about the project proposal. One moment, please. The hold music was classical, something with violins that probably cost more to license than Liam made in a month. He waited, his free hand drumming against his desk. Mr. Brooks. Ava's voice came through the line, clear and professional. Have you made a decision? Yes, ma'am. I'd like to accept the position on the team. There was a brief silence on the other end. When Ava spoke again, something in her tone had shifted slightly, become less formal. I'm glad. The first meeting is Monday evening at 6. Can you arrange childcare? Liam thought about his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who sometimes watched Emma when he had to work late. I can make it work. Good. Rachel will send you the details. And Mr. Brooks? Yes? Thank you for taking the risk. She ended the call before he could respond. Liam sat at his desk for a long moment, staring at his phone, wondering what exactly he'd just agreed to. Around him, the third floor continued its normal Friday rhythm. Someone was complaining about the coffee machine. Someone else was planning their weekend. Normal life. Normal problems. Except his life had just stopped being quite so normal. Monday evening arrived faster than Liam expected. He dropped Emma at Mrs. Patterson's apartment at 5:30 with her homework and a promise to be back by 8. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher who'd lived in their building for 20 years, waved him off with a knowing smile. Big meeting? She asked. Something like that. Emma will be fine. You go do whatever important thing you need to do. Liam took the elevator to the 40th floor at 5:45. The building was quieter at this hour, most of the regular employees already gone for the day. The reception desk was empty, but Ava had texted him earlier with directions to a conference room at the end of the hall. He found it easily. Through the glass walls, he could see 3 people already seated around the table. He recognized one of them, Marcus Webb from the legal department, though they'd never actually spoken. The other 2 were strangers. Liam pushed open the door. All 3 looked up. Marcus stood and extended his hand. He was in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confident posture that came from years of courtroom experience. You must be Liam Brooks. Marcus Webb. Legal. They shook hands. Marcus gestured to the others. This is Sarah Mitchell from Human Resources and David Reynolds from Operations. Liam shook hands with both of them, noting the curiosity in their expressions. They were probably wondering the same thing he'd wondered when Ava first made the offer. Why was an IT technician on this team? Take a seat, Marcus said, gesturing to one of the empty chairs. Miss Carter should be here shortly. Liam sat down, acutely aware of the difference between his department store button-down and the designer labels everyone else was wearing. Sarah was reviewing something on her tablet. David was making notes in a leather-bound notebook that looked like it cost more than Liam's entire work wardrobe. The door opened and Ava walked in. Everyone stood up automatically. She waved them back down with an efficient gesture and took her seat at the head of the table. She was wearing gray today, her hair pulled back, her expression all business. Thank you all for agreeing to be part of this project, she began without preamble. This team was selected because each of you brings a perspective I need. Marcus, you understand the legal frameworks we're operating within. Sarah, you have direct insight into employee concerns and complaints. David, you know the operational realities of implementing change at scale. She turned to look at Liam directly. And Mr. Brooks is here because he understands what it's like to be invisible in this company. The bluntness of the statement made everyone turn to look at him. Liam felt his face getting warm, but he kept his expression neutral. The goal of this project is simple, Ava continued. I want to identify why talented people leave this company, why morale is declining despite competitive salaries, and what we can do to fix it. But I don't want surface-level solutions. I want to understand the real problems. She opened a folder in front of her. Over the next 3 months, we'll be conducting confidential interviews with employees at every level, gathering data, analyzing patterns. Then we'll develop actionable recommendations for structural changes. She looked around the table. This is confidential work. Nothing discussed in this room leaves this room. Understood? Everyone nodded. The meeting lasted 2 hours. They discussed methodology, timelines, interview protocols. Liam mostly listened, occasionally taking notes, trying to absorb the scope of what they were attempting. Sarah talked about exit interview data showing concerning patterns. David mentioned operational bottlenecks that were frustrating mid-level managers. Marcus outlined potential legal considerations. When Ava asked for Liam's input, he almost deflected. Almost said he didn't have anything to add. But then he remembered why she'd asked him to be here. Most of the people I work with don't think anyone at this level cares what they think, he said. They assume complaints go into a black hole. So they stop complaining and just accept things the way they are. The room went quiet. Sarah looked uncomfortable. David frowned. Ava leaned forward slightly. Explain that. 6 months ago, someone on my floor submitted a suggestion about the parking garage lighting. It's too dim in certain sections, especially in winter when people are leaving after dark. The suggestion went to facilities management. Nothing happened. The person who submitted it never heard back, never got an explanation. Now, when people ask him if they should bother making suggestions, he tells them not to waste their time. That's a facilities issue, David said. Not really what we're addressing here. It's exactly what we're addressing, Ava said, her tone sharp. That kind of dismissal is why people stop engaging, why they stop believing the company cares about anything except productivity. She made a note on her paper, then looked back at Liam. What else? Over the next hour, Liam found himself talking more than he'd expected, about the small indignities that regular employees dealt with every day, the way executive assistants treated anyone below a certain pay grade like they were interrupting something important, the fact that the third-floor break room had been waiting 4 months for a working microwave while the executive floor had a full catering service. Some of it felt petty as he said it out loud, but Ava didn't dismiss any of it. She took notes, asked follow-up questions, pushed him to be specific. When the meeting finally ended at 8:15, Liam felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion of being seen, of being taken seriously, of mattering in a way he hadn't mattered in years. Everyone filed out except Ava, who was still making notes. Liam gathered his things slowly, unsure whether he should leave or wait. You did well tonight, Ava said without looking up from her notes. I mostly just complained about parking garage lighting. You identified a systemic problem with how this company handles employee feedback. That's valuable. She finished writing and looked up at him. How did it feel? The question was more personal than professional. Liam considered deflecting, but that wasn't why he was here. Uncomfortable, he admitted. Like I was betraying everyone on the third floor by sitting at this table. But you stayed. I stayed. Ava stood up, gathering her own materials. The discomfort means you're doing something real. The moment you get comfortable in these meetings is the moment you stop being useful to me. They walked toward the door together. In the hallway, the 40th floor was completely empty now, just dim lighting and the distant hum of the building's systems. How's your daughter? Ava asked as they walked toward the elevators. The question surprised him. She's good. Worried about her friend moving to California, but otherwise good. That's hard at that age. Losing friends. Yeah, but she's resilient. They reached the elevator bank. Ava pressed the call button. I meant what I said in my note, she said, looking straight ahead at the closed elevator doors. About you seeing me. I haven't felt seen in a very long time. Liam didn't know what to say to that. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside together. Ava pressed the button for the ground floor, for Liam's floor. They rode down in silence. When the doors opened on the third floor, Liam stepped out. He turned back to say goodnight and found Ava watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Same time next Monday, she said. I'll be here. The doors closed and she was gone, continuing down to the ground floor. Liam walked through the empty third floor to his desk, gathered his things, and headed home. Emma was already asleep when he picked her up from Mrs. Patterson's apartment. He carried her to their own apartment, tucked her into bed, and stood in her doorway for a long moment watching her sleep. His life had been simple before this. Invisible but safe. Comfortable in its predictability. Now he was sitting at tables with executives, offering opinions about company culture, being seen by a woman who ran a billion-dollar empire and felt completely alone at the top of it. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Regular work during the day, project meetings on Monday and Thursday evenings. Liam interviewed employees from different departments, compiled their feedback, brought it back to the team. Some of what he heard confirmed his own experiences. Some of it surprised him. The third meeting, Sarah shared data about employee turnover that shocked everyone. The fifth meeting, David proposed structural changes that Marcus immediately flagged as legally problematic. The seventh meeting, Ava asked Liam what he thought about implementing an anonymous feedback system, and his answer influenced the entire direction of that initiative. Slowly, Liam stopped feeling like an imposter in those meetings. He found his voice, found that his perspective mattered not despite his invisible position but because of it. And slowly, in the margins between professional discussions, he and Ava started having conversations that had nothing to do with company culture. She asked about Emma. He asked if she'd thought any more about the lake in Vermont. She told him about the pressure of board meetings where everyone wanted something from her. He told her about the exhaustion of being a single parent who never felt like he was doing enough. They were becoming something that neither of them had a name for yet. Not friends, exactly. Not colleagues in the traditional sense. Something more honest and more complicated than either of those labels allowed. On a Thursday evening in the 8th week, after everyone else had left, Ava walked Liam to the elevator like she'd started doing after their meetings. "I'm going back to Vermont next month," she said. "The cabin by the lake. 4 days. No phone, no meetings, no one needing anything from me." "That's good," Liam said. "You should do that. I wanted you to know why I'll miss our Thursday meeting." The elevator arrived. They both looked at it, neither moving to get in. "Thank you for this," Ava said quietly. "For taking the risk, for being honest, for not treating me like a position." "Thank you for seeing me," Liam replied. "For making me visible." She smiled then, a real smile that reminded him of the photograph by the lake. Then she stepped into the elevator and the doors closed and Liam was alone in the empty hallway. He stood there for a moment, understanding that something had shifted between them over these past weeks. Something that went beyond professional collaboration or mutual respect. Something that felt like the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. Liam took the stairs down to the 3rd floor, picked up his things, drove home to Emma, made dinner, helped with homework, did all the normal things that made up his normal life, but he didn't feel invisible anymore. And somewhere 40 floors above him, he thought maybe Ava didn't feel quite so alone. The story didn't end with declarations or conclusions. It ended with understanding, with connection, with two people who'd found something real in the space between their very different worlds. And that, Liam thought as he turned off the lights in Emma's room, was enough.